My brother's rage attack left me unconscious on the kitchen floor. When I woke up in the ER, my parents said, "He's just stressed, Kala. Don't make it worse. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about." That night started like any other Sunday dinner. The house smelled like Mom's roast chicken, and Dad's old clock ticked in the corner. I thought it would be a calm evening, but peace never lasted long when Derek was around. He came in late, tossing his car keys on the counter, his jaw tight. He didn't look at me when he said, "So you're keeping the business now, huh?" His voice was cold, sharp like glass. I froze. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Mom looked nervous. Dad had passed away 6 months ago, and we were still trying to figure out what to do with his small auto shop. Derek wanted full control, but Dad had told me before he died that he wanted both of us to run it together. But Derek didn't want to share. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the dishes jumped. "Don't play dumb, Kala. You think you deserve what's mine." "It's not yours," I said quietly. "It's Dad's." And he trusted me too. That was all it took. His chair scraped back, loud against the tile. His face twisted with anger. I had seen Derek angry before, but never like this. His eyes looked almost empty. Mom stood up, trying to calm him. "Derek, honey, please." But he didn't hear her. He came at me, shouting things I couldn't even understand. The next few seconds were a blur. I remember pain flashing behind my eyes, the floor coming up fast, and then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, I was staring at white hospital lights. My head throbbed, and I could taste blood. Mom sat beside me, holding my hand like nothing had happened. "Where's Derek?" I whispered. She sighed, looking tired instead of scared. "He's home." "He didn't mean it, Kala. He's just stressed about everything that's been going on. Don't make this harder for the family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had a cut on my forehead, bruises up my arm, and she was telling me not to make things worse? "Mom, he hit me," I said. My voice broke. She squeezed my hand tighter. "You know how Derek gets when he feels cornered. He didn't mean it." I turned my face away so she wouldn't see me cry. I'd always known Derek was the favorite. He could do no wrong. When we were kids, if he broke something, I got blamed. If I cried, I was dramatic. If he yelled, he was passionate. But now, lying in that hospital bed, it finally sank in. No matter what he did, they would always protect him. And no matter how hard I tried, I would always be the problem. When the nurse came in, Mom stood up quickly and said, "Don't tell them too much. Just say you slipped." I stared at her, speechless. She patted my shoulder like I was a child again and walked out. That was the night something inside me changed. The night I realized my family would rather lie for my brother than stand up for me. I lay there, listening to the machines beep softly around me, replaying the moment his hand hit me, the sound of my mother's voice excusing it all. They said he was just stressed. But I knew better. That night, I stopped being their daughter. I became the secret they wanted to keep quiet. The hospital released me the next afternoon. Mom picked me up, acting like it was a normal day. She talked about groceries, the weather, anything but what had happened. When we pulled into the driveway, Derek's car was already there. My stomach twisted. Inside, the house smelled of coffee and lemon cleaner. Derek sat at the kitchen table, arms folded, pretending to look sorry. He didn't meet my eyes. Mom motioned for me to sit. I stayed standing. "Kala," she began softly, "your brother's been thinking about what happened. He feels terrible." Derek looked up, his face blank. "Yeah," he said flatly. "Didn't mean for things to get that bad." It didn't sound like an apology, more like something he was told to say. I waited for him to take responsibility, but he just stared at the wall. Mom gave me that look, the one that said do the right thing. "You two need to make peace. Families forgive each other." I opened my mouth, then closed it. I could still feel the bruise on my cheek every time I moved my jaw. I stopped myself. "I can't just pretend nothing happened." Mom sighed. "He's under a lot of pressure, honey. He's trying to keep the business running, keep things together after your father." Her voice trailed off. Derek leaned back, smirking faintly. "You always make things dramatic, Kala." That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't new. He'd always done this. Twist things until I was the one apologizing. And Mom always let him. I took a slow breath. "You attacked me." He frowned like I'd said something ridiculous. "You were yelling first. You pushed me, remember?" I froze. That wasn't true. But he said it so calmly, like he believed it. Mom turned to me, her tone suddenly firm. "Kala, if you hadn't provoked him, maybe." My throat tightened. I didn't provoke him. He lost control. Derek gave a fake laugh, shaking his head. "You've always had a temper. Don't act like you're innocent." That line, "you've always had a temper," hit me like a slap. He was rewriting what happened, and she was letting him. Mom's hand reached for mine. "Let's not fight anymore. Please, apologize to your brother so we can move forward." I stared at her. "You want me to apologize?" She nodded slowly, eyes glossy with forced concern. You both said things you didn't mean. Don't let this destroy the family. Derek sat perfectly still, waiting. His expression was blank except for the tiny flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. Something inside me cracked again, but not from fear this time, from disbelief. They really thought I would carry the blame. I forced myself to speak. I'm sorry for yelling, I said quietly. The words burned coming out. Derek's lips twitched into a smirk, gone as quickly as it came. See, Mom said brightly, as if everything was solved. Now we can start fresh. Derek stood, stretched, and gave me a pat on the shoulder. Good talk, sis. I flinched. He noticed, and his grin widened before he left the room. Mom started clearing dishes that weren't even dirty. We just need peace, she murmured. He'll calm down once things settle. I watched her wipe the same counter over and over. I wanted to scream, to tell her that peace built on lies wasn't peace at all. But I said nothing. When I went upstairs, I passed Derek's door. He was on the phone, laughing softly. The sound made my skin crawl. In my room, I sat on the bed, staring at the bruise on my wrist. They had turned it into my fault. Again. That night, I finally understood the truth. My family didn't protect me from him. They protected him. The morning light hurt my eyes when I walked into the office. I kept my hair down to cover the side of my face, but the bruise on my neck still showed. Every step felt like walking through water, slow, heavy, unreal. Rough weekend, my coworker Jenna asked, glancing at my arm. I forced a smile. Yeah, slipped on the porch steps. I'm fine. She nodded, accepting it easily. People always wanted simple answers. Nobody wanted the truth. At my desk, the ringing phones and printer noise made me flinch. Every sharp sound reminded me of raised voices, slamming doors, the sound of something breaking. I kept replaying that night even when I didn't want to. My body still reacted before my mind could stop it. During lunch, I sat in my car instead of the break room. I didn't want anyone to ask questions. I touched the small cut near my hairline, hidden under makeup. It still ached. My phone buzzed. A message from Mom lit up the screen. Remember to talk to Derek soon. He feels awful. Don't hold grudges, sweetheart. I stared at the words until they blurred. My hands started shaking. She still didn't see it. She never would. I typed out a reply. Please stop bringing him up, but deleted it before sending. There was no point. She'd twisted into more guilt. That night, I dreamed I was back on the kitchen floor. The smell of metal and lemon cleaner mixed in the air. When I woke up, my sheets were tangled and my throat hurt from holding back screams. I got ready for work again, covering the fading marks with more makeup. In the mirror, my reflection didn't look like me anymore. I looked like someone pretending to be fine. At work, Jenna dropped a folder on my desk, startling me. I jumped, spilling coffee across the papers. She frowned. Calla, are you okay? You've been jumpy all day. I'm just tired, I said quickly, grabbing napkins. Didn't sleep much. She hesitated but didn't push. When she walked away, I exhaled shakily. It was easier to lie than explain. Nobody would believe it anyway, not when my own family didn't. By the time I got home, another text waited. You should call your brother. It's not healthy to stay angry. I turned the phone face down. The room felt small, like the walls were shrinking. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor. The mirror across from me showed a woman who didn't trust her own memory and for the first time, I said the truth out loud, just to hear it spoken. He hurt me. The words hung in the air, quiet but solid. I touched my arm where the bruise had turned yellow. No one else needed to believe it. I knew what happened. Still, when my phone buzzed again, I couldn't stop myself from looking. Don't forget, family is forever. I turned the phone off and sat in the dark, tracing the outline of each bruise, one by one, until I couldn't feel them anymore. Rain fell steady outside as I sat on the floor of Dad's old study, surrounded by dusty boxes. Mom had asked me to help sort through his papers for taxes, but she didn't stay to help. The room smelled faintly of motor oil and paper. The scent of his shop, the place where I'd spent so many afternoons watching him fix engines and hum along to old country songs. Most of the folders were filled with receipts, notes, and contracts. Then, near the bottom of a worn leather briefcase, I found an envelope with my name written in his handwriting. My chest tightened. I hadn't seen his writing since the funeral. The envelope wasn't sealed. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded twice. I opened it carefully. It was a copy of his will. The first part was what I expected. He left the house to Mom, savings split between us. But halfway down, one line stopped me cold. 50% ownership of Rain's auto to my daughter, Calla Rain. Just me. Not both of us. For a moment, I couldn't move. My father had trusted me to carry on his work. He hadn't left it all to Derek. He had chosen me, and somehow nobody told me. The words blurred as my eyes filled. I thought back to every conversation since his death. Mom saying, let Derek handle the business stuff, or, you don't need to worry about that. It all made sense now. They had hidden it from me. I sat there in silence, hearing the soft tick of the clock. The papers around me suddenly felt heavy, like pieces of a puzzle that had been waiting for me to notice. Then I remembered Derek's words the night he lost control. How he said I thought I deserved what was his. He already knew. That's why he was so furious. He wasn't shocked that Dad trusted me. He was angry that I might find out. I pressed my hand over my mouth, shaking. The truth wasn't just betrayal. It was planned silence. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Mom. Don't forget to be kind when you talk to your brother. He's under strain. I stared at the screen, then looked back at the will. Dad had trusted me, but she never did. She had protected the wrong child and buried the truth with him. I folded the paper, slipping it into my pocket. It felt like holding a piece of him, proof that I wasn't invisible after all. Outside, thunder rolled over the fields. I stood and looked around the dim study at his framed photos, his tools lined neatly on the wall. He'd left order behind, even in death. I whispered quietly, "I'll take care of it, Dad." But under the calm words, something fierce grew. The pieces were coming together, and for the first time, I understood why that night had happened. It wasn't random anger. It was fear of me finding this. The kitchen clock ticked loud as I waited at the table. The copy of Dad's will lay flat in front of me. My hands felt cold even though the air was warm. When Mom and Derek came in, I didn't waste time. "I found something in Dad's things," I said, my voice steady. Mom looked confused, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Derek's eyes narrowed instantly. "What did you find?" he asked. I slid the paper toward them. "This. His will." For a second, no one moved. Then Mom reached for it, scanning the lines. Her fingers trembled. Derek leaned over her shoulder, reading faster, his jaw clenching tight. "That's not the final copy," Mom said quickly. "It's signed and dated," I replied. Her eyes darted to Derek, then back to me. "Your father changed some things later, sweetheart. Maybe you just grabbed an old draft." I shook my head. "No, he didn't. This is what he wanted. He left me half the shop." The air changed. Derek's chair screeched as he pushed back from the table. His face went red. "You think you can just walk in and take what I built?" I stared at him. "What you built? That shop was his. He trusted both of us, not just you." He slammed his hand down, making the salt shaker jump. "You don't deserve any of it." Mom rushed between us, voice trembling. "Stop it. Both of you." But he wasn't listening. He grabbed the chair and shoved it aside, the legs scraping against the floor. "You always have to ruin everything." "Derek!" Mom yelled. He turned toward her, breathing hard. "You told her, didn't you?" She shook her head, panicked. "No, I didn't. She must have found it on her own." He glared at me again, pointing a shaking finger. "You went through Dad's stuff? You had no right. He was my father too," I said quietly. Something in his expression broke. He grabbed the chair again and threw it to the side. It crashed against the counter, splintering one leg. Then he stormed out the back door, the screen slamming behind him. Mom covered her mouth, eyes wide. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking clock. I looked at her. "You knew about this, didn't you?" Her hands dropped slowly. "It wasn't the right time to tell you. He was already upset, and I didn't want things to get worse." "Worse?" I said softly. "You mean you didn't want him to turn on you?" She looked away. "He's your brother. He's had a hard life." I stood up. "He's had an easy one. You've protected him from every consequence." Tears filled her eyes. "Please, Calla, don't tear this family apart." I stared at her, realizing she still didn't understand. It had been torn apart long before I spoke. The chair lay broken on the floor between us, a perfect picture of what our family had become, something once solid, now cracked beyond repair. The house was quiet when I came by that evening. Mom thought I wanted to talk, but I had another reason. I'd tucked a small voice recorder into my pocket, the kind Dad once used for his business calls. When she went to make tea, I set the device behind a photo frame on the shelf. My hands shook, but I pressed record anyway. I needed the truth to speak for itself. Mom didn't notice. She was busy setting cups on the table, glancing toward the door every few seconds like she expected him to walk in. And he did. Derek came in without knocking, his boots tracking mud across the tile. He didn't look at me. "Where's Mom?" he demanded. "I'm right here," she said softly. He threw his keys on the counter. "You told her about the will." "I didn't," she whispered. "Don't lie to me." His voice rose, sharp and fast. "You always defend her. You think she's better than me?" I stayed still on the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone. The recorder's red light blinked from behind the frame. Mom's voice trembled. "No one said that. Please lower your voice." Derek took a step closer. "You made her believe she could stand up to me. You made her think she's strong." "Derek, don't interrupt me," he shouted, hitting the wall with his fist. The sound made me flinch. He leaned closer to her, his words low and furious. "You created this mess. You always chose her side. You pushed me out." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I only wanted peace." He laughed without humor. "Peace? You mean control." I gripped the edge of the couch, every muscle tight. For the first time, she didn't defend him. She just stood there, shaking. He went on louder, his tone breaking. Everything's falling apart because of you. Because of her. You made her stronger. Now she thinks she can take everything from. Then he slammed the table, sending the teacups clattering to the floor. Mom stepped back, crying quietly. Finally, he grabbed his coat and stormed out, the door shaking in its frame. I waited a long moment before speaking. Now you know, I said quietly. She sank into a chair, covering her face. He didn't mean. She stopped herself mid-sentence. The usual excuse died before it could form. I reached behind the frame and switched off the recorder. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the ticking clock. She looked up slowly, her expression hollow. What are you going to do with that? I don't know yet, I said. But at least now you've heard him. Her hands trembled in her lap. For the first time, she didn't ask me to forgive him. She just stared at the floor, the sound of his voice still echoing through the house. The proof was small, just one file on a device, but it was enough. It wasn't my word anymore. It was his. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town without telling anyone. The place was old but quiet, with walls thin enough to hear my neighbor's TV through. I liked the noise. It meant someone was nearby. I unpacked slowly, trying to feel safe in my own space. For a few weeks, there was silence from home. No calls, no messages. I started to breathe easier, thinking maybe it was over. Then one night, headlights swept across my window. My heart dropped when I saw the truck. He found me. Derek stepped out, slamming the door hard enough to echo through the parking lot. I froze by the window, watching him pace before heading straight for my door. Calla! His voice thundered through the hallway. Open up. I didn't move. He hit the door once, twice, then shouted again. You think you can hide from me? My hands shook as I reached for my phone. Before I could dial, the pounding stopped. A shadow moved past the window. Then came his voice, lower but meaner. I know you're in there. Something in me snapped. I opened the door just enough to face him through the chain lock. You need to leave. He leaned close, eyes wild. You've been talking to Mom. You think that recording changes anything? I'm done being scared of you, I said, though my voice trembled. He laughed, pushing against the door until the chain strained. You don't get to decide when this ends. The metal gave way, snapping off the frame. He stumbled inside, fury written all over him. I backed up fast, grabbing the nearest thing, a lamp. Stay away from me, Derek. He moved closer, jaw tight. You ruined everything. You turned her against me. You did that yourself. He lunged forward, knocking the lamp from my hand. It hit the floor and shattered. I fell against the wall, breath caught in my throat. His shadow loomed over me. Don't you dare call the police, he hissed. But I already had the phone in my pocket. I pressed the emergency button with shaking fingers. The operator's voice came through softly, asking if I needed help. I whispered, yes, and the word felt like air after drowning. He realized too late. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Derek turned toward the door, panic flashing across his face. He ran outside just as the red and blue lights filled the lot. 2 officers shouted for him to stop. He froze, hands half raised, before they pulled him to the ground. I stood in the doorway, shaking, watching it all. My breath came out in short bursts, my body too tired to move. One officer came over, asking questions, but I barely heard him. All I could think was that it was finally over. Not clean, not easy, but real. The sound of his voice faded under the sirens, swallowed by the night. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. My palms were damp as I waited in the hallway, the sound of footsteps echoing off the tile. When the clerk opened the door, I walked in and took my seat near the front. Derek sat a few rows ahead, his wrists cuffed, his head tilted like he didn't care. Mom and Dad were beside him. Neither turned around. I tried not to stare, but the distance between us felt louder than anything the judge could say. My lawyer leaned over, whispering instructions, but all I could hear was the quiet hum of the ceiling fan and the steady tap of my heartbeat. When the judge called my name, I stood and walked to the stand. The floor creaked under my shoes. I didn't look at anyone, just focused on the small microphone in front of me. Please tell the court what happened, the prosecutor said gently. My throat tightened, but I began. He came to my apartment. He broke in. I told him to leave. He didn't stop. My voice shook, but I didn't stop either. I described the fear, the noise, the moment I called for help. The words came out uneven, but true. Every detail felt heavy, but I refused to look away from it this time. The defense tried to twist it. They asked if I'd provoked him, if maybe things had gotten out of hand. I said no. He chose what he did. The room was silent after that. Even the judge looked down for a long moment before nodding for me to step down. As I walked back to my seat, my mother finally glanced up. Her eyes were red, but she said nothing. My father kept his hands folded tight, staring at the floor. They didn't look at me when the officers led Derek away. The sentence was short, 6 months, with probation to follow. It wasn't much, but it was something. When the gavel hit the desk, the sound felt final. Afterward, people shuffled out, talking in low voices. My parents stayed seated. I waited a few steps away, hoping maybe one of them would say my name. They didn't. Mom reached for Derek's handcuffed wrist before he was taken out. She whispered something I couldn't hear, her lips trembling. He didn't look back at her or at me. When they were gone, I stood there alone in the nearly empty room. The air was still, heavy with everything unspoken. My lawyer asked quietly if I was all right. I nodded, though it wasn't true. The bruises had faded, but the silence between us had taken their place. Outside, sunlight hit the courthouse steps, too bright for the day's wait. I stopped at the bottom, taking one last look at the doors behind me. They hadn't believed me for years, but now the truth was written down, sealed in paper and ink. Still, the quiet from the people who should have loved me most hurt worse than any wound he'd ever left. Winter came early that year. The trees outside my window stood bare, branches thin against the gray sky. I sat at the small desk in my apartment, a blank page in front of me. The pen felt heavy, but I started to write anyway. Dear Mom and Dad. The words looked strange on paper, like they belonged to someone else. I hadn't spoken to them since the hearing. Part of me wanted to erase their names and start over, but I kept writing. I used to think everything was my fault. Every fight, every silence, every time you looked at me like I'd done something wrong. I thought if I stayed quiet, you'd finally see me. I thought if I forgave enough times, things would get better. The ink smeared where a tear landed. I wiped it away and continued. Now I understand it wasn't mine to fix. You protected him because you were afraid to face what he really was. You called it love, but it was fear wearing a softer name. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and slow. The sound reminded me of the nights after Dad died, quiet but full of things that couldn't be said. I don't hate you. I did for a while, but hate kept me tied to you. I just don't want to carry your guilt anymore. You can keep it if you need to, but it doesn't belong to me. I paused, thinking of Derek sitting somewhere behind cold walls. The papers had said 6 months, but the judge later added more time for violating the restraining order. It didn't make me happy, not really. It just meant I could sleep without checking the locks twice. He made his choices. You made yours. And I'm finally making mine. I forgive myself for believing your lies. I forgive the girl who thought she had to earn peace. I set the pen down, reading it back slowly. The words looked simple, but they carried everything I hadn't said out loud. My phone buzzed then, breaking the stillness. A voicemail. The screen showed Mom's number. My hands hesitated before pressing play. Her voice cracked through the speaker, tired and strained. You ruined us, she said. We can't even show our faces anymore. I hope you're happy. The message ended. I sat there, staring at the phone until the screen went dark. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. For a second, I thought about mailing it. Then I slid it into a drawer instead. Some things didn't need to be sent to be said. The snow outside thickened, covering the street below in white. The silence didn't hurt this time. It just felt like space, empty but mine. I blew gently on the last line before the ink dried. I'm done living for your forgiveness. Years passed quietly after the trial. I built a small life that fit me, steady work, a circle of kind people, mornings without fear. The apartment changed over time, new furniture, brighter walls, a feeling of calm that once felt impossible. I rarely spoke of my family anymore. Some stories are better left to rest. Then, one morning, the past found me again. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made my stomach twist. Local man arrested after violent assault. Repeat offender Derek Rains in custody. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The article gave few details, only that a woman had been hospitalized. His picture stared back at me, older, harder, eyes still cold. I read the words twice before setting the phone down. The story spread fast. Reporters camped outside my parents' house, asking questions they'd avoided for years. I didn't call them, but their faces appeared on the evening news. Mom looked pale, holding Dad's arm as cameras flashed. She said softly, "We didn't see what he was capable of. We should have listened sooner." It was the first time I'd ever heard her admit it. I turned off the TV and stepped onto the porch. The air was cool, the sky wide and gray above the trees. Neighbors walked by, unaware of what the name Rains once meant to me. I leaned on the railing, watching the leaves drift across the street. My phone rang again, an unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail came through moments later. Mom's voice, small and broken this time. "You were right, Calla. We were wrong. I'm sorry." I listened once, then deleted it. The apology came years too late, buried under everything it had cost. Still, there was a strange peace in hearing it. The truth had finally reached them, though it arrived like a storm long after the damage was done. The wind carried the faint smell of rain. I wrapped my sweater tighter and watched the horizon darken. Somewhere in that moment, I felt the weight I'd carried start to lift. Not because they understood now, but because I no longer needed them to. The world had moved on, and so had I. I thought of the girl who once hid her bruises, the woman who whispered the truth into silence, the one who stayed standing when everything fell apart. She had survived every version of him and them. As the first drops of rain touched the porch railing, I whispered to no one but the air. He was never just stressed. The words left my mouth soft but certain. They didn't carry anger anymore, only truth. I closed the door behind me, leaving the noise of the world outside, and let the quiet settle like a long-awaited answer. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away? Or should I have given my family another chance? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed my story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.